Okay, let's begin with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the time that we have to study your word. We know, Lord, that we are taking upon ourselves a difficult task, studying the book of Ezekiel slowly and going over each verse and trying to understand, going at a child's pace, which may sometimes seem a little bit slow, but we know, Lord, that there's much light there. And we are thankful for each person who's participating in this study. We need your wisdom and understanding. We need your Holy Spirit to teach us, and we need you to guide and lead us as we study. We pray for your church. We know that there's many truths that have been trampled upon and forgotten. And we just ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can bring these to our minds and that we can understand them. And thank you for hearing our prayer. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So when we begin with Ezekiel, I know that some of us have a good understanding of when Ezekiel is writing, but not everybody who's watching this is going to understand that. And so we're going to place Ezekiel, and we're going to do it from his book, but I just, I want to remind us of the 70 years captivity. We know Daniel was taken captive in the fall of 607. And we're going to go over this chronology. And then we're going to have, which is what we're going to look at here, is March 16th, 597 BC. And this is Daniel's captivity. And this is Jehoiachin's captivity. And Ezekiel is going to begin writing after this time. And we know that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed over here. I'm going to put it way over here in 586 BC. So Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and Zedekiah, this is going to be his captivity. Of course, he's killed. And this is what Ezekiel is dealing with. He's dealing with this history here and also the history afterwards. So he's going to be addressing this. So we're going to begin with reading Ezekiel. And as I said, as I had mentioned to people earlier, we're probably going to get through 3 verses. But these 3 verses are extremely important in establishing the chronology of Ezekiel and the context in which he's writing. And in order to understand his time prophecies, we need to understand these verses. So this is what we're studying today, just 3 verses. Now I'm going to bring things up on my screen. I'm going to share them. And sometimes I forget to unshare when I'm writing. So if I do, somebody please remind me. So Ezekiel 1 verse 1 says, "Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the river of Chebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him." So there's a lot of information here about Ezekiel. One of the things we'll know is that Ezekiel is a priest, which is a very important point. Which, of course, he is also a Levite, because in order to be a priest, he has to be of the tribe of Levi, but he's specifically a priest. And we don't know much about who he is other than what he tells us here. That is, the son of Buzi. That doesn't really tell us too much. We don't know who he is. We don't know any of his genealogy. And he's in the land of Chaldeans, so he's in Babylon, and he's by the River Chebar. So this is a river in Babylon, obviously, and it's about 500 miles to Jerusalem. So if he was going to travel this distance, if he was going to walk it, he would travel about 500 miles. So it's quite a distance. Now, there is a shorter distance. You could go across the desert, and that would be much shorter, but that's not normally the route that's taken. If you draw a map of the Levant here, you have Egypt over here, and you have Israel here. Now, you have Syria up here, and you have Assyria. Assyria was over here, and Babylon over here. And there's this desert here between them, between Israel. This is Judah, this is northern Israel, this is Syria, this is Assyria. You have some rivers that run through here, the Tigris and Euphrates. This is Euphrates over here. And Babylon, in order to come to Israel, has to come up this way and then come down. So they always come from the north. They don't come this way. And also just the way the roads come into it, it's from the north. So Babylon and Assyria always came from the north when they came to attack Israel or Judah. And this area is called the Levant. It's also called by the Assyrians, it's called the Hatti land. So and then you're going to find documents that refer to it as that way. It's also called Palestine, the Palestinian area, the land of Palestine, land of Canaan. Different names are given it at different times. The most modern name is the Levant, this area here from the Mediterranean. What's that? Well, see, I'm not sharing this. Thanks for reminding me. So I was explaining all this, drawing this. So Egypt, Israel, Syria, Assyria, Babylon. That's a very rough looking map. And this is the Levant, so this is the Hatti land. And we're going to be dealing with, now he's probably over here. I don't know because it's not really a map, but he's here in Babylon, down by the River Chebar. So he's down here. He's not really close. He's not up here in northern Babylon and Assyria. Now, Assyria at this time doesn't exist, but Babylon has this whole region, Assyria and Babylon. And of course, Syria still exists in some ways as a land, but it's part of it is taken over by Babylon. In a sense, Babylon kind of owns all this area in that all of these different peoples are being controlled by Babylon. And Babylon runs a protection racket, which was really common in those days, that you have Egypt over here, and Egypt sometimes would want to get money from the different nations and cities in the Levant area. And to do so, they would have to have enough power, and they would say, if you pay us, we will protect you from Assyria or Babylon, who's ever the ruling power over here. And Babylon and Assyria would do the same thing. During 723 BC, when Hoshea was taken captive, Assyria was the ruling power, and Assyria and Egypt were both trying to get control over Samaria, which is up here in northern Israel. So Hoshea, for a time, he was under Assyria, and he was supposed to pay them money, but he decided that Egypt was stronger, and so he was paying Egypt money. And then that's when the king of Assyria came in and began the siege in Samaria. So he made a mistake in judgment. He should have probably stuck with Assyria. Not sure why he didn't, but that was his choice. thinking that Egypt would be the stronger power. And maybe it was just Egypt was closer, Assyria was farther away. It's hard to know. But that's the type of situation that was happening. And obviously this is a great trade route. And also you have the coast here, the ports and the coast, Tyre and these different cities along here. So there's a lot of trade going through the land of Israel. And of course, there's a lot of wealth here that's being stripped away by Egypt and Assyria and then later Babylon. So that's the situation that was existing in that period. And that's the, as we're going to deal with the captivity of Jehoiachin, we will look at that and how that works. Now, the first part in chapter 1, verse 1, is that it says, it came to pass in the 30th year. Now, this idea of the 30th year, one of the things that we would note about this is that when they're counting and they're using something like the 30th year or the 4th month or the 5th day, that's what we call an ordinal count. That is, if I'm going to count the fingers on my hands, the first one is the first finger. There's no, you don't start with a 0. And this creates a problem. So we're going to have to address this. Now, the way that most commentators address this 30th year are two different ways. They assume that it's either the 30th year of Ezekiel's life, that is, he's 30 years old, and since he's 30 years old, then it's also referring to him being a priest. So he's 30 years old, and it's when he's old enough to become a priest. So that's part of the idea of the 30th year. So he's 30 years old, it's the 30th year. Now, the other way it's addressed is that this is the 30th year from some event. And the event that it is pretty much, if they're going to look at an event, we know when that event is, and that is the Passover of Josiah. Now, in seeing this as the Passover of Josiah, though, there still becomes a problem when trying to address this as the 30th year. So we're going to look at that here. So I'm going to have to draw this out. And there's a lot of symbolism in the 30th year. But we know that he's over here somewhere, right? So he's after Jehoiachin's captivity. It says it's in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. So we're just going to put that 5 there. And this is 10 years here between Daniel's and Jehoiachin's, though it's really like 9.5. And then we know that, so here's Ezekiel. In 1, verse 1 to 2. So here he is in that point, and it says this is the 30th year. Now, I know this is a sort of tedious job to try to figure these things out, but we have these kings, and when you're just dealing with the Bible, so if you're just dealing with what the Bible says, you have Jehoiachin. It'll talk about when he begins to reign in relationship to another king. So his dad, how long his dad reigned. And then you would have to go back and look at all the different kings. And so I'm just going to bring this up, a diagram of it. And rather than drawing this out, so this is a diagram which I did. I just got to share this here. Quite a long time ago. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. See how big it gets. It's a little too big, but we'll accept that. So over here we have all these different dates. And this is actually dealing with Jeremiah. And here we see that we have the reign of Josiah. So Josiah reigns, and he reigns for 31 years. And in the 31st year of his reign, Jehoahaz is going to reign. And Jehoahaz reigns for 3 months. And then we're going to have Jehoiakim begin to reign. And so I don't have Jehoiachin in this. But what I want to show you here is that this is how we understand the reign of Josiah. He reigns fall to fall. And these are the years BC. And you can see the 18th year of his reign here goes from the fall of 623 to the fall of 622. Now, this 18th year of his reign we're going to look at. And just quickly type it in. I should know that. So it's 2 Kings chapter 22. And we're going to read some things about Josiah here. And Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidiah, the daughter of Adar of Boskath. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And it says here, and it came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah, that the king sent Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the scribe, to the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, that he may sum the silver which is brought into the house of the Lord. So there's going to be some work that's going to be done on the temple. And we're going to find in the 18th year of his reign that they're going to, Hilkiah the high priest said unto Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. So there's going to be this revival that occurs in his 18th year. Now, Josiah had already been doing a work of revival earlier, which we're going to look at as well. But it's going to talk here about Josiah's reforms. So this is 2 Kings chapter 23. And so it's going to talk about all the different things that he does. So they're going to read the book of the law. They're going to do all this work, and I'm not going to go through all this detail. And they're going to have this Passover in Jerusalem as well. But this is talking about these reforms. So I'm going to go over to this Passover here. And the king commanded all the people, saying, Keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of his covenant. Surely there was not holden such a Passover from the days of the judges that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein the Passover was holden to the Lord in Jerusalem. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits and wizards and images and so forth. So it's going to talk about all this stuff that happens. But the point is that this Passover occurs in the 18th year of Josiah. And when we look at this event, so if we're just looking at how other people would look at it, I'm just going to put 622 BC here. And then I'm going to put this date here. So this is just lining up with here. And we're going to say this is 592. Now, this is a period of 30 years. But it says in the 30th year. So some scholars will count this from 622 BC. So this is the 18th year of Josiah. And they're going to say, well, if this is the 30th year, this needs to be 593. And the way that you would count this, if you're going to do it that way, is you would go 622 is the first year. And then you would go 621, 620, right? And then you would get, that would be 3 years. And then you get to 610, that would be 13 years. And then you would get to 600, and that would be 23 years. And then you would just add, 600, 599, 98, 97, 96, 95, 94, 93. So I don't know. That's how I count on my fingers. But you can see if this is the first year, you wouldn't say 592 is the 30th year. But we're making the case that this is 592. And so I have another explanation that even though this is the 18th year of Josiah that's being referred to, so I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that his count is different. And that is he's counting this as something else than just a regular count from the 18th year. So when he says it's the 30th year, he doesn't tell you what it is. And that should be a clue for us to understand it. Now, this is going to be something that we're going to study in a bit more as we go through Ezekiel, because as we go through this chronology, we're going to have to understand this. But I'm going to jump to chapter 40, verse 1. And as I said, we're going to study this in more detail. Right now, I'm just going to basically reference it because it's telling us a bunch of things that we don't have time to look at. But it's going to say, once I get it on your screen, in the 25th year of our captivity. So one of the things we know is that when he starts writing his book, he says he's in the 5th year of our captivity, or Jehoiachin's captivity specifically. And in Ezekiel 40, he says he's in the 25th year of his captivity. So this is, on appearances, it looks to be 20 years later. So this is another issue that we're going to have to deal with a bit later. Some of this stuff, some of these details. And in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was smitten. So it says it's the 14th year after the city was smitten, which refers to the destruction of Jerusalem. In the selfsame day, the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me thither. So he's going to have this vision, and this vision is going to be on just on the surface of it, it's going to be 20 years after his first vision. And this would agree with many people's view of this. But he says something interesting here. He says, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month. So does he tell us which month it is?
No.
Okay, so somebody says no, he doesn't tell us. But the beginning of the year, what would that refer to?
Would that be the first month of Eve?
Okay, so this is the way, if you look at most commentaries, that's the way that they will interpret this. Not all commentaries, but most commentaries will say, this is the beginning of the year, and that's in the spring. So it must be the first month. And now the 10th day of the first month is the time in which you set aside the Passover lamb. It's brought out on the 10th day of the first month. So when people look at it that way, it really affects their chronology. And I know a lot of people who take it this way. But when we look at the Hebrew here, so we're going to, I'm going to bring up the Hebrew. So most of you don't read Hebrew. But we have, here I have all these, numbers, and I can click on them. But over here, it will have these when I click on them with my eSword, you can look at it. But what I want to look at is these two numbers here. This is 7218 and 8141. And it says here, Barash Hashanah. Now, Rosh Ba just is the Hebrew prefix to a word, which means in, right? So B, the letter Bet, which makes the B sound. And then there's a Rosh, an Aleph, and a Shin. And so it says Rosh. And then it says Ha, which is the. And then Shana is just the word year, right? So if I look at this in the King James, and now I'm going to look here at the beginning of the year. Well, this in the beginning of the year is just two Hebrew words. The first one is Rosh, and the next one here just says Shana. But I also can look at that and see that in the beginning, so that word in comes from that bet at the word Rosh. Now, the word Rosh it's also a Hebrew letter, Rosh, or Resh is one of the Hebrew letters, Resh. And it's actually the shape of a head. And the word Rosh just means head. It's actually the first word in the Bible is Bereshit, in the beginning. So the word Rosh can be translated beginning. And that's why the King James translators translated it as beginning. The only thing is when you have the term Rosh Hashanah, it's an expression in Hebrew that refers to the beginning of the year in the fall or the civil year. Now, when you're looking at a biblical calendar, when the year starts in the fall, they don't call that month the first month. They call it the seventh month. That is, they always count the months from the spring. And they've done that, counted the months from the spring ever since the Exodus, because that's when God says to Moses that this month, which was the month of Abib, or Nisan, that's the modern Babylonian term, but Abib or Aviv, which was the ancient Hebrew term for the first month, that it's going to be for you the beginning of months. And that word there, beginning, is the word Rosh, head of the months. So the months begin in the spring, but the year can begin in either the spring or the fall. And this causes a confusion for people. Now, I'm going to try to, I know this is a bit tedious, for some people to try to understand this part. But let's just take this year, 597. So we got a year on our calendar, which is 597 BC. So this is a Julian year. If you were using an astronomical calendar or a Gregorian calendar going back into the past, you would actually call this 596. You would call it this. You would actually have a 0 year. So astronomical dates have a 0 year, and Gregorian dates written into the past have a 0 year. At least they're supposed to. But this is 597 BC. And we know that this is January 1st, and this is January 1st starting the next year. So our year goes from around the time of the solstice, the winter solstice to the winter solstice was originally how this would have been understood. Now, the Jewish calendar is going to have these months that are going to begin in the spring. And so you're going to have all these months. I don't know. So you're going to have a year look like this. You have 12 months in the time that we have here now. This is just, I'm starting at the beginning, at the end. But I'm going to have different times. It's going to be slightly different. But I'm just going to put here, this is going to be the 10th month, the 11th, the 12th, and this would be the first month. And so it roughly goes like that. You're going to have 12 months, and you're going to have the year divided here for counting it. And so obviously you would have 12 other months over here. So you're going to divide the year up in this way. And they're always going to count their months from the spring. But the thing is, sometimes they will start the year, and I shouldn't say sometimes, because every year you have their religious calendar that begins in the spring, but you have a civil calendar that begins in the fall. And that civil calendar is probably an older calendar. That is, people would think of the year as beginning in the fall, but they never numbered the months. That is, in the past, they never numbered the months. So when God is giving them this numbering to count, this is the first time they actually number the months. They used to just name them, but now they're actually numbering them. So it's something unique to the Jews. The Babylonians don't number the months. They just name them, and the Jews used to just name them. But here now they're numbering them. And so sometimes the year would begin in the fall. And so this is the spring, and this is the fall. One of the things you'll notice, though, if you have a year that's going to go from spring to spring, so I'm gonna actually do it this way. You're going to have a year that's going to begin in the fall. So this is a fall to fall year. So this would be the civil, and this would be the ecclesiastical. So you have your ecclesiastical year. It's just for your religious feasts. And in a sense, it actually only lasts for 7 months, because originally when they were given the calendar, all of the feasts would happen from the 1st to the 7th month. There would be no feasts or feast days from the 8th to the 12th or to the, all the way through here. It would be in the spring again that you would have this religious year. So it's basically 7 months out of the year that you have the religious calendar. But then these months are just counted through to start the year over again. Now, in order to distinguish between the spring and the fall, they would call this fall year Rosh Hashanah. I can't remember if it has 2 N's or not. I think it's 2 N's. Okay, Rosh Hashanah. So you have this year called Rosh Hashanah. This is the beginning of the year. But if you're going to have your year start in the spring, this start of the year would be called the return of the year. So it actually has a different name. You're not going to call this the beginning of the year in the spring. You're going to call it the return of the year. And they have another word. Instead of Rosh, they have the word Shuv. And Shuv is an important word, a Hebrew word for us, because it's the word that's used for repent, and it means turn or return. And when the Jews returned to Jerusalem from Babylon, that's the word that was used. To restore Jerusalem, that was the word Shuv, means return. And so these words Rosh and Shuv, we should become familiar with as Hebrew words. They're very important words. They're used a lot in Scripture. So in Ezekiel chapter 40, so this is a long way around, but I want people to clearly understand this. When it talks about in the return of the year, it doesn't say the return, it says at the head of the year. So if it was the return of the year, it would be in the beginning of the year, if we were going to translate it into our idiom. 1 N, Stephen says. Yeah, and I always get that wrong. I always think there should be more. There isn't in Hebrew, so I don't know why I always think there should be in English. So this says in the Rosh of the year, or the Rosh Hashanah, and then it says in the 10th day of the month. Now, I do have, and I had this quote here. I should have got it ready. Oh, that's not the one. See if I can find this quickly. Yes, so I'm going to have to blow this up so you can see it. So I'm going to do it this way. And so this is a quote from the rabbis. It's an ancient quote. It's from the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is a commentary on the Talmud, and the Talmud is a commentary on the scriptures. So it says, can you find such a possibility that when the temple was destroyed for the first time, it was the year after the sabbatical year? But isn't it written in a verse that Ezekiel experienced a prophecy in the 25th year of our captivity, at the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was smitten? Which is the year when the beginning of the year is on the 10th of the month? You must say that this is referring to the Jubilee, which begins on Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishri, which is the 7th month. So what they're saying here is that in Ezekiel chapter 40, that this is referring to a Jubilee year. And we're going to say that this is the 10th day of the 7th month. And this is Ezekiel 40. Verse 1. This is Ezekiel 1, verse 1. And if this is a Jubilee year, this would mark the 50th year, right? So this would be the 50th year. And the 50th year begins in the fall. Now, I'm going to have to draw this out. Now, when you have a date, and your date is anywhere from the 1st to the 6th month, it doesn't matter whether you're using a spring to spring or a fall to fall calendar, they will overlap, right? So you're always going to have your fall. Let's say this is a fall year, and this is a spring to spring year. You know that we go like this and fall. We know that in this fall calendar and this spring calendar, they're going to overlap. This will be the same year, right? These are the same year, and this would be the first month of whatever year this is. Doesn't really matter. If this is still going to be the first month, and this is going to be the first month. So from the 1st to the 6th month, they're the same. But as soon as you get to the 7th month, you're now in a new year. Or if you get to the first month in the spring, you're going to be in a new year. So you're going to see they're always going to overlap here from the spring to the fall. So it's not affected. And we'll show this in more detail later on. But the point that I'm making here, so I'm going to deal with this whole cycle of years. I don't know if I can get enough years in here. I'll get a couple more years over here. Okay, so I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And I recommend people do this, that you write these things out. because the only way that you can really visualize them and don't have enough room here. So I'm just going to add these extra years over here. So I'm going to go 49, 50. So you just kind of have to remember that. That's one line. So I just didn't put enough strokes there. And when we're dealing with these years here, these years can be divided into two. So what I recommend people to do is to draw the years like this, just like you would a day and a night. And you could actually have this being 1 year, right? So this would be 1 year. And you would just say that part of it is the spring and part of it is the fall. So I would say this is the spring and this is the fall. And I would draw this out. So you would need 100 of them, of these little squares, to get 50 years. And when they're dealing with this, I'm going to actually do this as the 50th year. So this is the 50th year. But when we look at the 50th year from a Jubilee year, it's going to begin in the fall. So this is the 49th year. And when I look at the beginning, so I'm going to do this again here, I'm going to have, this is also going to be the 49th year and the 50th year. And this is going to be in 622 BC. And this is going to be in 573 BC. Now, this is the Passover of Josiah, and it's going to be over here, what we call the first year. And so that first year is going to be divided like this. And we know that the first year of a Jubilee cycle is the 50th year. So when we count a Jubilee cycle, we're going to count it where the 49th year happens. That's going to end in the fall, and the 50th year is going to begin. But the 50th year is also the first year. So you're going to have this first year is going to also be the 50th year. And then you're going to have, so I'm just skipping a bunch of years here. So this is 622 BC, and this is all the years in between, right? It's going to be like this. You're going to have the first year is the 50th year, but the first year, let's do it this way. So this is going to be over here. So this is 622 BC. And technically 622 BC is going to start over here, like halfway through one of these years. So let's put a fall year here. And 622 BC is going to go from here to here. Okay? So I hope people can follow this. I want you to draw this out and to understand this. So this is the 49th year. And so the 49th year is going to begin here in the spring, but the 50th year is going to begin in the fall. And that is that the 50th year is the first year. But the 49th year is this year of this cycle that's going spring to spring. So it's a little bit confusing in that this 49th year and this 50th year is kind of the same year. It's one way of looking at it. It's probably one of the most difficult concepts that people have in understanding, because some people say, well, the Jubilee year is the 50th year. But we know that the Jubilee cycle is 49 years. So the best way to look at it is this 50th year is this first year. Now, when we get to 592, and that's this year, and we have 622 over here, so this is the Passover of Josiah. and we're saying that this is 622, we would look at this and we'd say, well, that's 30 years, but Ezekiel calls it the 30th year. And that's because he's counting the Jubilee cycle. And so that means here, this year, which is also the 50th year, is also the first year. And so then he's going to count 622, 21, 20, and then you're going to get 619, 609, 5, let me see, 609, 599, wait, I'm doing that wrong. I'm going to go here, 599, and then we're going to go 599, 98, 97, 96, 95, 94, 93. And this would give you, if you did the count this way, you would end up with 593 as the 30th year. But we don't do that, because what we recognize, if this is the first year that begins in the fall, any events that happen in the spring are happening in the 49th year. And so that creates a 0-year system. So the 0 is where we would start with the 49th. And so when we start doing this count and we count this out, what we get is because this is, it's kind of hard to explain. I can't do it this way. It's too confusing. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to draw this out. You're going to have to draw it out in detail. And when you start to count this, what you will find is that the 30th year is going to be 592. It's going to be the 30th year because you have a 0 year. And so this cycle here is, when you count up here, you count 30 years, it's actually the 30th year. And it doesn't look that way, the way that I drew it. It's not very clear. And then when you get over here, you're going to see that this is the 50th year, is this fall year. So when it's the 10th day of the 7th month, it begins the 50th year. But it's actually, if we counted this, this is 573 BC. And over here, this is 592 BC. And so what that does is it creates this period of 19 years. So from here to here is 19 years. Right? So you can see from 592 to 573 is 19 years. And then when we read in Ezekiel 1 verse 1, so I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this. I will send you the paper that explains it. And maybe I can even look at some of the diagrams here. So when I need to share this here. So we're going to go back to Ezekiel 1 verse 1. So it says, it came to pass in the 30th year, right, as we said, in the 4th month and the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw the visions of God in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity. So remember, it says this is the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity. And to know when Jehoiachin was taken captive, so we're going to come back to this. I'm going to try to get this clear to everyone. We're going to look at some documents. Now, these documents are found on a site, which I'm going to give you the links to these, called livius.org. And livius.org is a site for scholars that has all of these documents, ancient documents, and it has translations of them so that the average person like you and I can look at things that in the past we would have had to have been at a university studying to get access to these documents. Now, this document here is called ABC 5. It's the Jerusalem Chronicle, and this is from, it is a clay tablet that's written in cuneiform, which is a type of writing where they take a stick and they push it into the soft clay. And this is an old document that had recorded the activities of the armies of the king of Babylon. It wasn't a propaganda document like you would get on some, stele or something like a public display. It was just something for the records. So they kept this record of the different battles that Nebuchadnezzar's army, or the king of Babylon's army, would take. So earlier on, it was his dad. So you have these different kings, their battles being recorded, and not in any sort of descriptive way. It's mostly just a chronology of these things. So it's a chronicle, just keeping record of when these battles happened. Now, we have this translation, and you can see it starts in 605 BC, in the 21st year of the king of Akkad. That's Nabopolassar, that's Nebuchadnezzar's dad. He stayed in his own land, and Nebuchadnezzar, his eldest son, the crown prince, mustered the Babylonian army and took command of his troops, and he marched to Carchemish, which is on the bank of the Euphrates. So it's going to talk about these different battles that Nebuchadnezzar fought, and it's also going to talk about his dad and Nebuchadnezzar becoming king. So there's a whole bunch of information in here. But where we're going to move up is through this chronicle to line number 11 and 12 here. And it says, in the 7th year, so the 7th year is referring to the 7th year of the king of Babylon, which is Nebuchadnezzar. In the month of Kislev, which is the 9th month, that's Kislev in Hebrew. So in the 9th month, the king of Akkad, that's the king of Babylon, mustered his troops and marched to the Hatti land. So the Hatti land is Palestine. And it says, and besieged the city of Judah. And on the 2nd day of the month, Adaru, which is Adar in Hebrew, and if you click on the note here, so you're going to have this, it's going to say February to March 597. So it just says that it doesn't tell you exactly which day it starts on. It just says the month of Adaru started in February and ended in March in 597. Which I actually don't know if that's actually not correct in this case, but he seized the city and captured the king. And then it's going to give us some references, Jeremiah 52, 28 to 30, and 2 Kings 24, 8 to 17. And he appointed there a king of his own choice. And you click on that note, and it'll say Jehoiachin's uncle Mattaniah became, it says Ling, but it means king of Judah, and changed his name to Zedekiah. And that's 2 Kings 24, 17. And received heavy tribute and sent to Babylon. And in the 8th year, 597 to 96, the month of Tebetu, that's the 10th month. So that's in the winter, the king of Akkad marched to the Hatti land as far as Carchemish. So it's going to talk about these travels. Now, the question that we have and the difficulty that people are having is, and that has been brought up, is people say, well, they just have to trust me. And I'm saying that they don't. What they have to do is they have to understand some of these things. And now I'm not expecting that people are going to reconstruct everything that I reconstructed from the ground up. We do have some tools that we can test these things. Now, if you just go to Wikipedia and you read about Jehoiachin, they will tell you that he was taken captive on March 16th, 597 BC. And the reason they do that, it says in the 2nd day of the month Adaru. So when they put February to March 597, the month Adaru can go anywhere from sometime in February to sometime in March on the Babylonian calendar. But in 597, it didn't. Adaru actually started in the middle of March. And so the second day of the month, Adar, was March 16th, and the first day of the month, Adar, was March 15th. Now, to know this, you're going to have to look at some tools. Now, one of the tools I have, if I have it here, I know it's somewhere here. And then I'm going to give you a link to this as well. Now, this is the Babylonian calendar converter, and it goes from 626 BC to 75 AD. So this is, it's not something I made, it's just a Babylonian calendar converter. And so I'm going to, for some reason I didn't, I need to share the screen here. So here it is. And this is actually from Parker and Duberstein's, who were Assyrian and Babylonian scholars. And it's a book called Babylonian Chronology, and it's from the 1971 edition. And this Babylonian Chronology, I actually have tables, which I can send you as well if you don't want to use the program. But this program is much easier to use than looking at tables. And what I would do is I would take a year, and the way that you go through this is you don't type it in, you have to actually subtract. So I'm just going to go through and start subtracting years, and you can see I can go 100 years at a time, or I can go like this. And what I want to do is I want to go to the year 597. So I'm going to add, there's 593, and then I'm going to go, whoops, I went the wrong way. I want to go this way. So you can see it says 595, 596, 597. And you can see on here it says minus 596. So that's the astronomical year. Astronomers put a 0 year, BC and AD, just so it's easier for the math. And then this is the historical year, 597. I can make this a little bit bigger so people can see it. That's maybe a little better. And then what I want to know is I want to know for the month, Adar, and I guess I still have to do it this way. So, Elulu. Okay, I need to go the other way. I need to subtract months here. So there's the month Adar. You can see it says April 6th, but I'm on the 23rd day. So I need to get to the second day. So I'll just go this way, and there you go. And when you do that, you go here. This is, and it says in Roman numerals, it's the 12th month. It's in the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar, called Nebuchadnezzar II. It's the second day of the month. It's going to give you the chronological Julian day number, which is just counting days. It's going to tell you that it's a Sabbath, and it's the 16th day of March. And so this is the date that's being referred to in this document here. So when it says here, in the 7th year, this is the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar, in the month, the 9th month, Kislevu, which is Kislev, the king of Akkad mustered his troops and marched to the Hatti land and besieged the city of Judah. So he's going to start on the 9th month, and he's going to travel to Judah. And on the second day of the month, Adar. So this is, it doesn't say exactly what day in the month of the 9th month he left, but in the second day of the 12th month, he seized the city and captured the king. And so we know Jehoiachin is taken captive on the second day of the month, Adar. And so that's what we just showed here. So we know the date, it's March 16th. And this isn't disputed. You're not going to find differences of opinion regarding this. The only places you'll find differences of opinion are Jehovah's Witnesses. So they have a completely different chronology of the Babylonian captivity because they don't care about reality. And some other people that I found on the internet who really don't know anything about chronology and have some kind of theory that they're trying to prove, like some sort of cycle of Jubilee cycles or whatever, and they completely ignore any historical documents. So there are some people who don't want to look at history or documents at all in order to understand their Bible chronology. So this is a tool, and you're going to learn to use these tools. So right now we're going through this very, very slowly. Now, and somebody could argue and say, well, I have to trust you, but you can check these things out. I mean, this is standard scholarship. So it's not like I came up with this calendar converter to tell which day it is in the Babylonian calendar. This is something that's well established. And thousands and thousands of scholars have scoured through all these documents and have actually dated them all. And so we have this really solid chronology now for Babylon because of all these documents. And a lot of the documents are contracts, letters that are dated. And some documents are double dated. Later on, we get documents that will have two different calendars. They'll have an Egyptian calendar, which is a fixed calendar. It's not by observation. And then we'll have the Babylonian date on them. And so we can see that they line up. So one of the ways that we can establish how the Babylonian calendar works is by looking at these double dated documents. Plus as well, many of these things that are dated are astronomical phenomena, such as eclipses of the moon. And since we can go back and calculate when these eclipses occurred, and we find that they line up with these dates on these Babylonian documents, we can know that when those Babylonian kings reigned based upon this information. Now, again, some people don't care about facts, but these are things that can easily be demonstrated and shown to be 100% consistent, and that there really isn't an issue. So, so when we say when Jehoiachin was taken captive, it's based upon what Nebuchadnezzar says, and it agrees with the scriptures. So we're going a bit slower than I wanted to go, but I'm hoping people are following what I'm doing. I'm trying to show you the process that you need to go through. I know I'm not doing it in a nice, orderly fashion. It is that, I'm not just explaining it to you. I'm trying to get you to see the process. And so what I suggest you do, what I have written behind me, is do that on a piece of paper. You're going to write out from 622. You're going to write our years. So you're going to write not just these, but you're going to put our years in here like this. And you're going to have each of the years from 622 and go all the way to 722. So you can put, 50 full years in there. And then you're going to divide those years. You're going to put a spring to spring, and you can shade it over because the spring to spring and the fall to fall overlap here. So that the first month in the 49th year of something is the first month in the 50th year, but in the 49th year, you're going to have the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th month, and sometimes 13th month precede the first month. So let me make this clear. So when you're dealing with these calendars, and we're going to deal with it in 597. So we're going to deal with the year 597. We're going to put this on a line. And so what we have here is we have 598, 597, and 596. So these are 3 years on our calendar. This is a Julian calendar, January 1st to January 1st. And we're going to find that Nebuchadnezzar's 7th year is going to begin in the spring of 598. and it's going to go to the spring of 597. And his 8th year is going to go from the spring of 597 to the spring of 596. So we know how the Babylonian kings reigned, and we can tell that from all these documents because they date things in the year of his reign. Now, we also have Jehoiachin, and before Jehoiachin, we have his dad, Jehoiakim. And Jehoiakim is going to reign, and he's going to die. We don't know exactly when he dies, but we do know that when he dies, he's going to put Jehoiachin on the throne. So there's no clear evidence that Jehoiachin begins to reign the day his dad dies, because there could be some issue regarding that. But we usually assume it's the same time. And so that's going to be in December, because we know that Jehoiachin reigns for 3 months and 10 days. And so a simple way to look at this, I'm going to bring up one of these other calendar converters. And we're going to go on the Julian calendar to 598 BC. So I have to put a minus. I don't like the fact that we have to use minuses here, but so it's 598. And this is, I'm going to go to December. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, here we got Heshvan, and this is the 8th month. You can see here, this is the Hebrew year. You can see this is a rabbinic calendar here. And then we're going to I'm just going to go through and count the number of weeks. I'm going to count in my head roughly.
Do you mean to be showing something?
Yes, I do. Sorry about that. And I'm going to blow this up too. So this is a calendar converter that was made by Troy Van Horn. And here we can see we got the biblical calendar. This is Nisan 14. This would have been the Passover in 597. But we're going to go back here, and we're going to go to the 2nd day of Adar. And you can see that it's going to be March 10th Gregorian and March 16th Julian. And I'm going to have to explain these in more detail because I know people have trouble with the Julian and Gregorian calendar. And I said I was going to do it, but our time is running out, so I might try to get that done. And you can see it's a Saturday, so it agrees with the Babylonian calendar in this year. Doesn't always. I also have some other calendars here, rabbinic, the Mayan, the Islamic. So I got a few different calendars here. And what we know is that he's going to reign for 3 months and 10 days. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over here onto this side, and I have these months. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So I just took off 3 months. And then I'm going to take off 1 week and 3 more days. So this is kind of counting cardinally. So I probably, should have maybe just take off 9 days here. However you want to look at it. But it also depends on how they count it. So there's different ways in which they could count that. Because, if you started here on December 10th, 598, and I was going to go 3 months, I would just go month, month, month. That would be 23. Then I go a week, and then like that, and that would bring me to a different date. So it kind of depends on how long those months were that you're going to look at it. So this brings me a little bit further when I do it that way. So if I'm changing the months here or the months here, it's going to be different because they're different lengths of months. So I'm going to go back here again. So I'm on March 16th. I'm going to use the Hebrew months, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go back a week. And then I'm going to go 2 more days. So that's going to give me to December 10th. So this is the time when Jehoiachin begins to reign. He begins to reign at the beginning of December in 598 BC. And he's going to reign for 3 months and 10 days, right? So that's how we would look at it. So again, I can go 1, 2, 3, and then a week, and well, that's a day, pardon me, a week, and then, so just depends how you count it. So it's not always going to work out the same. Depends which way you count it. It's not as easy as you think to figure out exactly what 3 months and 10 days are. Now, so anyway, we're going to go back here again. No, we'll stay here. So now we're in March, and we know that this is the second day of the 12th month. So that's when Jehoiachin is going to be taken captive. And it's in the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So we're going to look at the scriptures here, and we're going to try to understand this. And so we're going to go and this is in so this is one that's confusing to people, one of these verses. It's 2 Kings 24, verse 12, and it talks about Jerusalem being captured. Okay, gotta go back. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So one of the things we saw when we looked at the Babylonian Chronicles, it says that he took Jehoiachin in the 7th year of his reign. And so this appears to be a contradiction between the scriptures and the Babylonian Chronicles. But we also have another passage that addresses this same chronology and the same event. And I'm just going to go to my cross-reference here. And we're going to find that this is in it's in Jeremiah 52. So we go to Jeremiah 52, and it says that this is the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive in the 7th year, 3,000 Jews and 320. And in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, he carried away captives from Jerusalem, 832 persons. So this is referring to a later time in Nebuchadnezzar's reign, during the time that Jerusalem was destroyed. In the 320th year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive the Jews, 745 persons. So there's these references. We'll see here this captivity of Jehoiachin is referred to in the 7th year, where in the other passage, it was referred to as the 8th year. And the question is why? So why are there these discrepancies? And so here's what happened. This is Nebuchadnezzar's 7th year. And we know it was on the second day of the 12th month that he captures Jehoiachin. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't carry him away captive the first day he takes him captive. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to spoil the city. You're going to do some work there. And technically, even Nebuchadnezzar isn't necessarily the one who actually takes him captive, even though his army is there. Because Nebuchadnezzar could be doing lots of other things. But we know that he's going to put Zedekiah on the throne. And he's going to put Zedekiah on the throne in the 8th year of his reign. So we know that Zedekiah is going to become king here in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar, not when Jehoiachin's taken captive. And Jehoiachin is going to be carried away in this period of time. from the 7th to the 8th. Now we know Jehoiachin is taken to Babylon. It's going to take a few months to get him there. So he's going to be in captivity in Babylon for a certain period of time. But things don't just happen on one day. So when Nebuchadnezzar takes the city and takes Jehoiachin, it's in the 7th year. But we're going to see it's going to be in the 8th year. So now we need to look at this again. So we had 2 Kings 24, where it said, again, we look at Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother and his servants and his princes as officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So according to this passage, so Nebuchadnezzar comes and Jehoiachin goes out to the king of Babylon. So it looks here like the king of Babylon is there. He and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers. And he's going to be carried away. And it says in verse 13, and he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And he carried away all Jerusalem and all the princes and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives. So there's going to be all these people. And in verse 15, he carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon, and the king's mother and the king's wives and his officers and the mighty of the land, and so forth. So, and it says in verse 17, and the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, his father's brother, king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. So this is all happening in this period of time, in this transition from the 7th year of Artaxerxes' reign to the 8th year, or not Artaxerxes, Nebuchadnezzar's reign, from the 7th to the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And so that's why in one place it says it's the 7th year, and another place it says it's the 8th year, because it's in the transition between those two periods of time. And obviously when he puts Zedekiah on the throne, this is in the 8th year, not in the 7th year. Now, so that's the 8th year statement, and I'm going to. So we had in the Babylonian Chronicles that it talks about the 7th year. And let's see if I can find this. Okay. It's going to talk later about the 7th year of it's later on. It's going to talk about the reign of Nebuchadnezzar when he takes Jerusalem. So we're going to have, again, another reference to that. So we're going to get to that when we get to later dates in the book of Ezekiel. So we're going to look at that period of the captivity. So I presented some information here, and I'm going to try to tie this up and sort of review this. So we have this chronological information in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 1. And it's not extremely straightforward. That is, I can tell you what these dates are, and you'll find that many other scholars would agree with these dates that I give. That is, there are many scholars who will agree that Ezekiel chapter 1 is in the 5th day of the 4th month in 592 BC. So when we deal with this, it's going to be the 5th day of the 4th month in 592 BC. And that's going to be July 21st on the Julian calendar. And they're going to put this date as October 22, 573 BC. It's the 10th day of the 7th month. And there's other scholars who have exactly the same dates. So it's not like it's something I invented. But there are scholars that disagree. And when they disagree, they have a reason why they disagree. But the question as we go through Ezekiel is we'll find that this is the only dates that will work if Ezekiel's chronology is correct. That is, Ezekiel is a person who was writing at that time actual visions that occurred to him, and he gave dates and he gave spans of time. And if we use some other dating than this, we will find that his spans of time don't work. That is, they create contradictions. And what I had to do is I had to resolve those contradictions. And I've done it in the book of Ezekiel. And that's what we're gonna understand as we go through this. So I don't expect at this moment that you're gonna understand all of this, but you can understand the problem, that we have this problem of these spans of time. And the way that I look at this, because you have 622 BC here, 622 BC to 573 BC is a Jubilee cycle. And this is what he's referencing here when he says it's in the 30th year. It's the 30th year of a Jubilee. So this Jubilee is then when we get here, when we get to the fall, because the day before the Jubilee begins, you're in the 49th year. But on the 10th day of the 7th month, on a Jubilee year, the 10th day of the 7th month begins the year. On a non-Jubilee year, the first day of the 7th month begins the year. And that's what we read in that rabbinic document from the Mishnah. So when it's the 10th day of the 7th month, you know it's a Jubilee year. And then you know that this 30th year is the 30th year of the Jubilee cycle. And when you know that, then you can go back to here and see the Passover of Josiah, that his Passover happened in the 49th year of the Jubilee cycle. And that fall would have been the 50th year or the first year of the cycle. And so when you count that as the first, when you get to here, that's going to be the 30th. So if you're going to start from the fall of 622 as the first year of the Jubilee cycle, you'll see that the fall of 593 is going to be the 30th year. And so this is a fall to fall count when you're counting the Jubilee cycle. And we're also we didn't really deal with this fifth year exactly, but we know that this fifth year is in relation to Jehoiachin's captivity. And there's a problem there because we know that most people count this as the fifth year of Zedekiah's reign. And I didn't really have time to resolve this here. But the best way that I can explain it, I probably shouldn't have erased this here, but when we deal with 598 and 597, and 596, we know that Jehoiachin, his reign is fall to fall. And so he doesn't have a first year of reign per se. He begins to reign in the fall after his dad has died. And so his accession year is going to start in 598 and it's going to end in 597. So this is the year he begins to reign. His first year doesn't begin until the fall of 597. And so it's going to end in the fall of 596. And if I keep going like this, 595, 594, 593, and then 592. And I'm going to call this the first year of his captivity. Now, normally, we would call this the first year of his captivity. And the way that most other people do it is they say, well, this is Zedekiah's reign. Zedekiah begins in the spring of 597. And that's the first year of his reign. And this is so he begins in the spring. Second year of his reign. This is going to be the third year of his reign. This is going to be the fourth year of his reign. And this is going to be the fifth year of his reign. But even when you do that, this puts this outside of the 5th year. It just creates problems. But what we do is we recognize that if Jehoiachin was reigning, his 5th year of his reign would have been from the fall of 593 to the fall of 592. And so when we're in the 5th day of the 4th month, that's going to be over here in 592. And so that's why it's called the 5th year. And just to reconcile the 5th year with the 30th year is a very difficult puzzle that people stumble over. But what they do is they create contradictions. And so we're going to have to go through this chronology again. What I want you to do is to spend some time trying to work it out on your own. It's not that you're going to solve it, but I get my music theory students to do this. I get them to work through things, and then I explain them to them after they've worked through it. And because they've tried to work through it, they now understand the problems. And when they hear the explanation, then it solves those problems, even if they couldn't work them out themselves. And then they can see what I'm talking about. So I want you to try to work out some of this chronology. You don't have to do it all, but just try to draw these years, divide them up, spring to spring, fall to fall, try to do counts, and see if you can get them to work. And that's going to take a bit of time on your part, but that's the only way you're going to understand it. So I'm going to deal with just one other thing, and that's the Jubilee and the Gregorian calendars. So when we deal with this date, we know that this is July 21st. And of course, I can just go to any calendar converter that has the Babylonian calendar on it. And so we'll go to that one that I gave you before. And we're going to go to, we'll just move. The best way to do it is just go like this. So it's going to move to 592 BC. You can see that. But I'm way.
Jen, are you meaning to share something?
Yes, I mean to share it. Sorry. Yeah, I'll get this shared. And so here we have this calendar converter. Now I want to go to July, and I can't do it that way for some reason, so I have to go this way. For some reason, you can't just type the months in. And I want to go to July 21st. Oops. So there's July 21st, 592 BC. And when I look at it here, it'll say it's the 5th day of Tammuz, the 4th month. And it's the 13th year of Nebuchadnezzar. And now, this is going to give me this Julian day number, and it's going to give me the year only in the Julian calendar. That is, very few people ever use Gregorian dates for events in the past. They use Julian dates, and that's, for various reasons, because one is we do have Julian dates in history that exist already, because the Julian calendar was created by Julius Caesar in 46 BC. And so any date that's recorded in that time in history is going to be using a Julian calendar. So it doesn't make sense to use a Gregorian calendar. But even earlier, we tend to use this Julian calendar way into the past. Once in a while, you'll see somebody who uses a Gregorian. Now, if I go to this on the calendar converter program, and so I'm just going to move a few years here. So I'm going to go to 592, and we're going to move the month to July, and then we're going to go to July 21st. What we will see here is that the Gregorian calendar is going to show 591, and that's because they add a 0 year. And you're going to see that there's 6 days different, that it's July 15th. But it's still the 5th day of the 4th month. Now, you'll look at the rabbinic calendar, it'll say it's the 6th day of the 5th month. So the rabbinic calendar does not work. And that's because it is a calculated calendar that didn't exist until about the 8th century. So, I mean, it existed in theory in the 4th century AD, but it wasn't really in use until the 8th century. And it's a calculated calendar that doesn't follow the biblical rules. So this is the calendar that Ezekiel is using because he's in Babylon, and we're going to deal with that as time goes on how to understand why he's using the Babylonian calendar and not the biblical calendar, even though they're pretty much the same. There are some differences. But he's in Babylonian captivity. He's only going to know the months based upon where he is, not in Jerusalem. He doesn't have that information. He can't observe the moon in Jerusalem. There might be differences that he might be able to recognize, but as far as the month itself, he's not going to know. So you would just use the month of where you are. But you can see it's July 21st. Now, that it is July 15th on our calendar, which is a solar calendar that is in line with the seasons or the sun, where the Julian calendar drifts. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this July 21st, and I'm going to go to 592 AD. So I'm going to go 592 AD, and you'll see that here the Gregorian calendar is actually 2 days after the Julian. And if I go to the year 200 AD, you'll see that they're the same. But if I go to the year 199 AD, you'll see they're a day difference. And all a person needs to do to understand the Julian and Gregorian calendars is to start going through the centuries, and you'll see which years they change. They will always, what happens is the Julian will always add an extra day, a leap year, February 29th, every 4 years, uninterrupted. Every 4 years, you add a leap year. But the Gregorian doesn't do that. It does it every 4 years, except if the year is divisible by 100. So in the year 200, the Gregorian calendar isn't going to add a leap day. It's not going to add February 29th. So if I go to the year 200 and I go to February 27th, 28th, right? And you can see that the Julian is February 29th. And then I go one more day, they'll both go to March 1st. That's because the Gregorian didn't add a leap year, even though it was the 4th year, because it was divisible by 100. But if it's divisible by 400, they will once again add a leap day. So I'm just going to go back here. Now, of course, they're not lined up here, but you can see in the year 400, even though it's divisible by 100, I'm still going to have a February 29th. And so in the year 2000, which is divisible by 400, we had a leap year. But if in the year 1900, we didn't, because it was divisible by 100, but it wasn't divisible by 400. And you can read about these rules on this calendar converter here, which I'm going to give you by Formulab. And it's going to explain the Gregorian calendar, and it's going to explain the rules of the Julian calendar, and it's going to use the modern Hebrew calendar, not the biblical one. And it has a bunch of other calendars on it, and it explains the rules. So I'm going to send you those. And we're going to start working through this chronology slowly. I'm also going to send you this, the Skyview Cafe, the link to that, the link to the Torah calendar, and also Scholar Gateway, which is a link to a Hebrew lexicon that's fairly easy to use, and a number of other resources I'm going to give you some links to after this study. And so we went through some things that were fairly difficult, and I don't expect you to understand them all yet. But we're gonna work our way through Ezekiel bit by bit. Now, what I want to do tomorrow is we're going to look at Ezekiel's vision of the wheels within the wheels. We're going to try to understand what's being talked about there. And we're going to look at the spirit of prophecy, what she says, and we're going to look at other Bible references to try to understand it. But there's some information that we have regarding this wheels within the wheels that most people don't know about. It's actually really new information that was recently discovered regarding what it is he saw in vision. And it differs from what people had taught in the past regarding what Ezekiel's wheels within wheels were. And that's just because we have more information regarding this. And this is because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we have some information of what he may be talking about. And it might be a little bit controversial as well. But I think we will see quite clearly that we can use the scriptures to support this view. It's just it wasn't understood. So I know I went a little bit over time. I'm going to try not to do that too often. Any comments on what we've been studying here? Am I going too slow? Am I going too fast? Any questions? Things I need to clear up?
Josiah's Passover.
Yeah.
622. Now he's spring to spring, is he?
What?
Is he a spring to spring count for the
No,
18th?
he's a fall to fall. And one of the ways we know that is that he has this Passover, and they've been doing all this work. It says in the 18th year of his reign, he's doing all these different things. And then they find the book of the law, and then they read the book of the law, and then they plan to have a Passover. They clean up the temple, and then they have a Passover. And if the 18th year of his reign is spring to spring, there would actually be no time for all those events to occur before his Passover. And we can see a parallel to that when we deal with Hezekiah. And in Hezekiah, he has the same issue, and they have to have the Passover in the second month because it takes time to clean up the temple and to get everything ready for a Passover. One is you have to tell all the people that a Passover is going to be happening. People have to plan for it and so forth. So this was obviously a fall to fall. The fall to fall calendar for Josiah. Now the thing is, the kings of Judah, from Saul, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, all these kings of Judah, they followed a spring to spring calendar. And in northern Israel, they kept a fall to fall calendar to count the reigns of the kings. And all we know is that at some point it changed to a fall to fall calendar. And we don't know where that was. My belief is that it actually happened with Ahaz in the time of his rebellion, that he began to keep a fall to fall calendar. And for a long time, I rejected that idea, and I thought that it must have happened in the time of Manasseh. But as I've looked through a lot of the chronology there and some of the words in the scriptures, that when he says that the seventh year of Hezekiah is the seventh year of Hoshea is the fourth year of Hezekiah. I think that's how it says it, or the sixth year is the fourth year. I can't remember. That the way that they word that means they're actually the same, that they're not overlapping. It's a unique phrase that I can show in another place. And so we know that with Hezekiah, at least, that he was keeping a fall to fall calendar. And so then his son Manasseh would have, Ammon would have, Josiah would have, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin. But Zedekiah goes back to a spring to spring calendar. And the reason he does that is because Nebuchadnezzar, who keeps a spring to spring calendar for his reign, is the one who puts Zedekiah on the throne. And Zedekiah is a puppet king. Even though he's He's the brother of Jehoiakim. He's the son of Zedekiah or Josiah. Zedekiah is still a puppet king. And Ezekiel, even though he counts some things in the reign of Zedekiah, he actually is treating Jehoiachin as if he's actually the king. So he's still counting Jehoiachin's reign when he counts the years of the captivity. So I know that's a kind of a more complicated answer, but we know that Josiah had to have been using a fall-to-fall count of his reign based upon his Passover. But when it comes to the Jubilee cycle, that's going to be a fall-to-fall count. It's not going to be a spring-to-spring count. So when you're dealing with that Passover, it's in the 49th year. And then the first year of the Jubilee cycle is going to begin in the fall of 622. And that's going to be the thing, is if you try to count this out, you'll have to recognize that. And if you draw it out, you'll see it. But you have to do it in detail. You can't just count 30 years. Because when I try to do that, I always get it wrong. So I have to be able to recognize that. So any final thoughts on that? That's a good question.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Just one more question concerning the Jubilee. It's on the year begins, the 50th year begins on the 10th day of the 7th month.
According to the rabbis, yes.
But that would mean the year therefore ends 10 days earlier on the first day of the 7th month.
No, what they would do is in a Jubilee year, according to the rabbis, the previous year is 10 days longer. So they're actually going to wait till the 10th day of the 7th month to mark the start of the new year. So that's what that document was that I read. Just bring it up again. So this is what I read at the beginning. It might have just passed people by a bit. But it says, can you find such a possibility that when the temple was destroyed for the first time, it was in the year after a sabbatical year? So this is one of the things dealing with the destruction of the temple. But isn't it written in the verse that Ezekiel experienced a prophecy in the 25th year of our captivity, at the beginning of the year or the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was smitten? And of course, we know that beginning of the year is Rosh Hashanah, which is the year when the beginning of the year is on the 10th of the month. You must say that this is referring to the Jubilee, which begins on Yom Kippur, the 10th of Tishri. So the way that they're arguing this rabbi who's writing the Mishnah, Arakim is the article, so I don't know if that's the writer. He's just saying that the year began on the 10th day of the 7th month. And that's something that would be only in a Jubilee year. So every other time, the first day of the 7th month is the beginning of the year. But in a Jubilee year, you wait till the 10th day of the 7th month to start the year. That's what he's saying there. But the point is, it probably doesn't really matter. But when you get to 573, when he says it's the 25th year of our captivity, the day before, it would have been the 24th year of their captivity. But once the new year has begun, he now says it's the 25th year. And it's the only way we'll be able to reconcile when Jerusalem was destroyed, with it being the 14th year since the city was smitten. And so they'll have to look at that on how they're describing this period of time, because the 14th year means 13 years, right? And we know it was destroyed in 586. And so the 14th year means 13 years. And so from 573, you add 13 years, you're 586. Where other people who look at the 25th and the 14th think that they're the same, but it's counting differently. And so we're going to look at that when we go through the year of the captivity and how Ezekiel counts these things. So it's an extremely important point. I hope that answers your question as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And, people, of course, are interested in the last 10 chapters of Ezekiel. It's a very, very interesting section. And the word Chebar, the extent of time, a great while, seeing that which is now. So it's interesting that he's by the river Chebar, because just the symbolism in that name. Could he have been a descendant of Zadok, the son of Levi? Yes. That is, if he's a priest, he's a descendant of Zadok, because they're the priests. So in order to be a priest, you have to be a descendant of Zadok. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. So we're going to try to go through this. Hopefully, people, if you have questions, you can always write me at Theodore James Turner @gmail.com. Theodore James Turner is all one word. TheodorJamesterner. And you can write me and ask questions. You can also put comments on the YouTube video, because it will be posted after a few hours. I'll have the YouTube video up if you want to watch it, and you can post questions there if you want other people to see them. And we'll try to get through this, as slowly as we can. So, and any questions that come up that I didn't answer clearly, I'll try to answer at the beginning of the next class. But it's going to take us at least two classes to get through Ezekiel's vision of the wheels within the wheels. And I hope by Thursday to get to the end of chapter 3. So that's kind of the goal for this week. But if we don't get that far, that's fine. And if we do move through it a little bit quicker, that's okay as well. So any other comments?
I just have a question.
Okay.
I just want to know that, so the year which begins on the first day of on the 10th day of the first day of the 7th month, it falls under the fall of the spring. Can you just clarify that for me, please?
Okay, so you're beginning, the day that begins on the, which day are you talking about?
I'm thinking about the year, like is this year that begins on the 10th day of the 7th month, ne?
Yeah, the 10th day of the 7th month in 573 BC. That's in the fall.
In the fall. I need to understand the fall and the spring, how they differ on that point.
How I get 473?
No, how we mark the fall and the spring, as you have said, like this 10th day of the 7th month is on the fall, ne? I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
I don't get what you're saying. So in 573 BC, I'm going to bring it up on the screen here.
Okay.
I got AD, I need to go BC. So in 573 BC, when we're going to get to the 10th day of the 7th month, what you'll see is it's going to be October 22nd, 573 BC. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, whoops. So it's October 22nd, and the year normally starts on the first day of the 7th month, but in a Jubilee year, it's going to start on the 10th day of the 7th month. So you have a question about this year here? What was your question?
My question is on the year begins on the 10th day, ne?
In this case, it's the 10th day of the 7th month that it begins. The civil year.
Normally it begins on the first day of the 10th month.
It doesn't matter that it's a Thursday or a third day.
Okay.
So on the first day of the 10th month would normally be the first of, so normally if this wasn't a Jubilee year, the first day of the 7th month would have been Rosh Hashanah. But because it's a Jubilee year, Rosh Hashanah begins on the 10th day of the 7th month.
Oh, okay, I get it.
So Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year. And that's what the rabbi said, is that in a Jubilee year, and that's why they mark this as a Jubilee year, is that they say, well, in a Jubilee year, the beginning of the year is on the 10th day, and it says Rosh Hashanah on the 10th day. So the rabbis read this and they see it as a Jubilee year. Christian scholars who don't understand rabbinic thought, they just read it, oh, it's the beginning of the year, it must be the spring, right? So you'll see that some commentaries, most commentaries, will say that this is in the spring. But then if you do that, the count doesn't work out for all the other dates in Ezekiel. You'll all of a sudden create all these different contradictions that don't resolve. And that's why many scholars recognize, not all of them, not the majority, but some, that this is actually the 25th year of the captivity has begun based upon it's the 10th day of the 7th month. It's a new year. But before that, it would have been the 24th year of the captivity. And so we will deal with that. We will get into the details of that as we go through that. Once we get to Ezekiel 40, you'll probably have forgotten a lot about what we talked about today. But when we get there, you'll have a better understanding of chronology, and it will make more sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but thanks for the question. So, and when you ask a question, it's never a bad one because probably other people are thinking the same things. And so, this is how we want to do it as we go through and study. Now, again, if you don't want to ask the question now, you can always email me, and I will respond to those questions.
I got a question here. I noticed here.
Yeah.
Just on the same converter you're using here.
Yeah.
The Gregorian, it says October the 16th, right?
Yeah.
But it's the year 572 BC.
Yeah.
So when does it change to 573 on a Gregorian?
So what they do on the Gregorian is they have a 0 year.
Okay.
So when you're taking the Gregorian calendar into the past, and you get from AD to BC, you put a 0 year in there. And that's because astronomers also do that. And people just find it easier to do the math. Because normally when we're going into BC dates, if we're doing history, we're going to use the Julian calendar, and we're not going to have a 0 year. But if we're doing astronomy, or if we're using the Gregorian calendar, we're going to have a 0 year. And so this creates confusion. And that's why most scholars just use the Julian calendar when they're dealing with BC dates. But you will see that it created confusion in Millerite history because Samuel Snow was reading a Dr. Hale's book on chronology, and Dr. Hales was an astronomer, and he added a 0 year. And so when he said 458 BC or 457 BC for Artaxerxes' 7th year, he actually meant 458 BC because he had a 0 in there, and that confused Samuel Snow and other people as well. So it is a problem, and I suggest that people use this calendar converter. I'm going to give you 2 other calendar converters. One is this one, the 360-day calendar of Bible prophecy converter. The guy's, in that case, which I shouldn't really say about somebody, but he's got really strange ideas that don't make any sense. But what he did is he took this other calendar converter here and he put it on one page. So you can see on one page, you can see the different calendars. He doesn't explain them or anything, but it's a nice, convenient calendar. And then, of course, this calendar converter, and then the Babylonian calendar converter. So those are really good calendar converters, easy to use. This one, you have to use the bottom numbers to move through the years. But yeah, it definitely is a lot easier to use. And if I, just take this one, and I just want to show you something here. If I go to, this is that date, 592 BC, and I go 19 years, it's going to bring me to 573 BC. And then I'm going to have to go up to October 22nd. So I would just go, and then I have to take 2 days off. Whoops. Oh, no, I got to go the other way. There we go. And you can see that's October 22nd, 573 BC is the 10th day of the 7th month. And it's basically 19 years between those 2 years, from 592 to 573, which is a Metonic cycle. So the calendar is going to repeat every 19 years. So that's what's happening there.
Okay.
So, but good questions. Anything else? I know we've gone over quite a bit of time, but if there's anything that needs to be cleared up, that's great. If you can wait till tomorrow, that's fine as well. Okay, so let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we had to study. You know, Lord, that some of these things are very difficult because we're not familiar with them. And even when I'm familiar with them, it's sometimes difficult to explain without making things too complex. Help me, Lord, to learn how to simplify these things, to leave out the extraneous details and just the things that people need to know. Help people to work through them as they take time watching these videos. We know not everyone can be here every morning, but we know that some may have to take time to watch these videos afterwards. But Lord, I just pray that you can help us to understand these things. We know, Lord, that you've given us this time to study once again before the Sunday law, and you've also given us this time to share with others. And we have to keep in mind, Lord, that this is about sharing these messages, and so we need to understand them. So please help us. Be with each person, each family, and be with us in our ministry to others. Thank you for hearing our prayer, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.